What's up, Sifters? It's time for some more Ask Shane Anything. Pledge $10 or more per month to our Patreon. Ask me whatever the hell you want. Let's go. First question this episode comes from Eddie Nelson. What games do you regret not having more time to play? Oh man, there's so many. I don't want to go back too far though. So I guess the one game from 2017 that I wish I've had more time to play, and I need to dedicate more time to play over the next couple weeks before the Game of the Year episode of Game Face, is Horizon Zero Dawn. When it came out, I got it. I played it for a couple hours. Matt had told me he was playing through it, so I knew I didn't have to play too much to talk about it on Game Face, so I knew he could probably carry the conversation. Since then, things just got crazy. I've not had enough time to go back and play it. I did play it a little bit on our 24-hour Patreon Drive stream, and people watching the stream were not into it. Games like that don't really play well in streams because there's a lot of downtime just running from one location to another, boring side quests, etc., etc. So there's one game for 2017 I wish I could spend more time with, and I promise I am going to. It's Horizon Zero Dawn. Next up, we have a question from Adam Rasmussen, and this is a long one, probably the longest question yet on Ask Shane Anything. Hey Shane, in the past week or two, both major software rating bodies, the ESRB and PEGI, have both refused to create new language around loot boxes and a simulated gambling aspect of games that's become so ubiquitous in the industry that fully priced single-player games are now doing it. Given the industry's unwillingness to inform gamers or their parents of the type of content that's being sold as appropriate for kids as young as 8 or 10 years old, is it time for actual government regulation around the practice of loot box gambling and excessive microtransactions in games? I don't think the government necessarily knows best, but if the industry is being openly disingenuous about their own practices, isn't it someone's responsibility to just inform people of what they're actually buying when they're spending 500 fun coins on a silver magic crate? Well, Adam, I don't know if you're a new patron, you might be, and if you are, thank you very much. But Matt and I had quite a throwdown over loot boxes on Game Face. I mean, epic Shane versus Marcus type throwdown from the Invisible Walls days. Matt is of the mind that loot boxes aren't gambling. I am of the mind of, if you look at the technical definition of loot boxes, that they're not technically gambling by the book, but loot boxes have the same dopamine release that you get when you gamble. And as someone who does gamble here and there, playing blackjack when I go to Las Vegas once or twice a year, I get the same feeling from loot boxes that I get when I gamble at a casino. And so to me, while by definition it may not be gambling, I agree with you. I think kids who are 8 and 10 years old should not be exposed to that type of a dopamine release from stimuli. And that's, to me, is exactly what you're getting with loot boxes. Now you're asking, who needs to be responsible for this? It doesn't seem like you're placing blame, but you're trying to figure out who needs to solve the problem and whose job really it is to solve the problem. And I think if you go back and you look at M-rated games, which were really controversial back in the early Mortal Kombat days, the industry stepped in and regulated itself, and that is always the best route to take. You don't want the government messing with art. So you need to self-regulate. You need to put your own sort of stipulations in place. You need to figure out your own way to solve the problem, and I think that's what needs to happen here. And that needs to start with the ESA. The ESA is the Entertainment Software Association, and they are sort of the political lobby for the video game industry. And in all honesty, Congress in the United States is going to ask the ESA to handle its business so it doesn't have to do it. And so I think you're going to see some movement on the ESA front. And I think really what you need more than anything is just transparency. And from a parent's perspective too, they need transparency. They need to know what their kids are getting into before they decide to play a game. So there needs to be clear labeling on boxes that there are elements of gambling in some games, and there needs to be transparency on the odds of getting something that you want, and you need to have expectations of what type of money you're going to spend to be able to get what you want. The way it operates now, where you're just basically throwing money into a wood chipper, that's not going to satisfy the US government, and that's not going to satisfy me, and it's not going to satisfy parents. So we need more transparency from the gaming industry, and it's tough with games because a lot of stuff can be hidden under the hood in code that people may never discover. It may take them a long time to discover. So we need transparency. And I hate to add more bullet points to video game boxes, but that's really what needs to happen unless we want the US government to come in and regulate it, and that's when everything goes to crap. Our next question is from Jeff Lynn. What's up, Jeff? You're the best. Thank you. Have you talked to Jeff Keighley recently? I thought he was great on Bonus Round as an interviewer. Knowing that Bonus Round was expensive, do you think something similar with Jeff could happen with the video conference call instead? Jeff wouldn't necessarily need to run the interview, but I liked hearing the developers talk about their games and the reasons for their direction and squirm about microtransactions and loot boxes. Okay, so first of all, you never saw developers squirm about loot boxes and microtransactions on Bonus Round because that show basically went away before they even became a big part of gaming. So that's never happened. And you're right, I would love to see that happen. As far as Jeff is concerned, Jeff is a really, really busy guy. He works on the Game Awards, and that is really a project that takes him all year to get together and produce and to get all the content in. It really is kind of a one-man show. He handles all the logistics of the show, and then he hires a show team to actually execute the show itself. But all the pre-planning, all the work that goes into the Game Awards, that's all Jeff, and he does an amazing job on it. And the reason he does an amazing job on it is because he focuses on it. He has like a laser focus on the Game Awards year-round. It's really hard to get him to do something else in this day and age. I have asked him to come on GameFace, and a long time ago he said he absolutely would. It just never really worked out for him to come on the show. So I would love to get him on GameFace. As far as him doing another Bonus Round type show, as you said, it's incredibly expensive. And doing it on a conference call, that's tough to do. Google Hangouts, you can have 5 or 6 people at once. Skype, you can Skype in multiple people at once, but the quality is usually so bad, the audio quality. People end up talking over each other. Some people will have a great mic. Some people will use their laptop mic. Some people will use like earbuds with a little mic on it, and the quality is so bad. And people end up talking over each other because they're not in the same room. It's really hard to make something like that work and be professional and, in all honesty, up to the standards of what I would want to produce for something that Jeff is involved in. I would not want to have a third-rate production for anything that Jeff Keighley does with me. And then there's the question of paying Jeff to come in and do it, and he obviously demands a pretty high price. I think he'd come into GameFace and probably do it for free, just to hang out and kind of catch up. But as far as doing like a weekly show with Jeff that's in the vein of a Bonus Round, it's probably not going to happen. And there's a reason why you haven't seen any other sites kind of copy the idea and do it either. Next up is Scott Newberry. Scott, thanks for the question. A good story is the one thing that keeps me playing and finishing a game. With you having the privilege to be able to play so many games throughout your career, it must be hard to keep track of all the different characters and story plots. Which ones have stuck with you and why? I'll be perfectly honest with you. You've probably heard this saying before about journalists who have worked in a space for a long time, whether it's sports or music or whatever. The old phrase is, they've forgotten more than you know about X. In all honesty, that is true in a lot of cases with me in games. I have gone back and looked at reviews that I wrote in the 90s for GameSpot, and some other places that I've freelanced at, and I read the reviews, and I hardly even remember playing the game, to be perfectly honest with you. One of the last ones I read, one of my old ones, was a game called Headhunter, which was this Dreamcast, like, GTA wannabe. Before GTA was really big, GTA 3 had just kind of launched, and people hadn't really figured out the open world yet. And I read my review of that. I did not remember a lick of writing any of it. You could have written it, and I would have said, yeah, sure, you wrote it. So after you do this for a long time, the memories start to fade. And that's kind of true with anything, not just video games. There are movies that I've watched back in the 80s that I don't remember a whole lot about. But through all that, I think it's actually useful, because what happens is you remember the stuff that actually matters. And I think if you're someone working in this space where you're providing commentary on games, providing perspective around games or insight on games, or trying to help people figure out whether they should buy something based on something they may have played in the past, I think that's really important, that your mind just naturally sifts through all the information in there and makes sure only the most important stuff gets through. So yeah, I mean, there are some storylines that I remember, and a lot of them are the most iconic. I've mentioned this before on other shows, but there's the one moment in Ocarina of Time where Link comes back and his village is burning down. And for whatever reason, that moment in Ocarina of Time has just stuck with me forever. Aerith dying in Final Fantasy VII, they're iconic moments. I can't remember all the little plot twists that happen in all these games. The big ones I can, obviously the big reveals and things like that I always remember. But it's really those moments that have become iconic, and they become iconic for a reason. But I think if I look back across the moments in video game stories that I really remember, they're the ones that are emotional. They have some kind of an emotion, and not like anger or hate or greed. I think it's when something a video game character loves has been taken away. It's loss. Loss seems to be something that sticks with me in video game stories in particular. I have played literally tens of thousands. I'm not just talking about played, I'm talking about like finished, played all the way through. So many games. And I think probably the most iconic moments from the stories are the ones everybody else latches onto for a reason. I think they're the same ones that I ultimately end up latching onto. The next one is from Javier Rodriguez. What's up, Javi? I hope I'm saying your name right. Since SIFTD as a service/website seems to be mostly automated, do you spend the majority of your time creating original content like Game Face, Pactor Factor, etc., or are there other behind-the-scenes parts of the business that people don't know or think about? Okay, first of all, SIFTD is not automated. SIFTD is hand-curated. So a human being looks at every single piece of content before it is ever added to the site. And I think that's our unique selling proposition. You can go to other aggregate sites like N4G, and there are some apps that are kind of doing the same thing SIFTD does, but all they're doing is just sucking in an RSS feed, in the case of a lot of the apps, and you just have 80, literally in some cases 80 versions of the same story. Or you have something like N4G where you're just letting anybody add anything to the machine that you want. And in that case, you're getting a lot of junk. You're getting a lot of fanboy drivel. You're getting stuff that just backs up one side of an opinion without considering the other side. The idea behind SIFTD all along was that it was a hand-curated social network, because even with all the modern technologies, there is no way to automate what SIFTD is doing. That said, we built our admin from the ground up to do that. So it makes it as easy as possible for a human being to sort through or sift through literally thousands of pieces of content to find the very best stuff. And so it's not automated. And so I still do a lot of curation. Recently, since we launched our Patreon, some of our users have offered to step up and help with curation. And some of them have been absolutely amazing. And so it has opened up a lot more free time that I didn't have before. I'm still curating, but I don't spend as much time doing it as I used to. Hallelujah. I've been doing it for like 3 years. And it's fun, and I actually still kind of enjoy it. But after you do it for 3 years for like 4 or 5 hours a day, it'll start to wear you down a little bit. So I do have more free time now. And yes, I mean, probably, I guess 60 to 70% of the time that I'm not curating, I'm creating content. Either I'm shooting something here in the studio, or Matt and Sam and everybody are in here for Game Face, or I'm shooting something like this, or I'm shooting Geif, or I'm traveling to Pactors. Sometimes we do have video editors who cut together some of the shows for us. Sometimes I cut together some of the shows. It all depends on how much time I have and what other responsibilities are going on. But to really answer your question, what other kind of stuff is going on that people don't know about? There is so much going on. A lot of it is working on ways to promote the site across other channels. So working on partnerships, like we have a partnership with Loot Crate. That stuff takes time, it takes maintenance, it takes reaching out. We have some other stuff on the back burner with another website in Europe right now that we're trying to work on. Part of it is just getting product, reaching out to PR, making sure that I get games so that I can talk about them on the show and cover them on our various shows. A lot of it is spent recording and playing, and I think that's been the hard part for me, is actually finding the time to play the games. Back at GT, I worked really hard. I spent, 10, 11 hours in the office every day, then I'd go home. But usually once I went home, all I really had to do was either play games or write about games. And so I had a lot more time to just play games. This job never ends. It literally, because I can do it from home, it never stops. And because it's so easy to just walk back to the bedroom and sit down at the computer and work, a lot of times you're sitting on the couch, you're like, and you kick your feet up. You think you finally have a little bit of time to maybe catch up on your favorite TV show or whatever. And then either you get a tweet or you get an email or something just pops in your brain and boom, it's like right back to work again. So the one thing I do not have as much time to do as I would like to have is actually play games. What I've done a lot for the last like 8 or 9 months is I play 10 to 15 hours of a game, but I never get to finish it. Some I do finish, like I just finished Super Mario Odyssey, and I do finish a good bit of games. But it helps that I have Matt, who has more free time to play, who can maybe pitch in, we coordinate, and I'll say, hey, I'm not gonna have time to finish this, can you maybe spend more time with it? And he works with me on that stuff, which is great. So there's so much stuff that people don't realize. It's like, because we're doing Patreon now, everything needs to be published twice. So it's published on SIFTD, and that process takes forever. Like Game Face is 3 hours long. So you get the show, you go in, you make sure the audio is all good, so you do your adjustments on the audio, you clean up the file, and then you render it. And that literally takes like real time, almost 3 hours to render it. Once it's rendered, you need to compress it, and that'll take 2 hours for a 3-hour show. Then you need to upload it to YouTube. That'll take 2 or 3 hours. Then you have to create all the promotion for it. You have to create the thumbnail image. You need to create the massive promotional image that goes in our carousel. You need to then add it to the site and make sure it's tagged to all the important games. You write the description. You do that once, and then it goes up for the patrons. So the folks on Patreon and the people on SIFTD.net. And then, depending on how long you set the exclusivity period for that piece of content, then you have to go do it all over again on YouTube a couple days later. You have to upload it again, and you have to recompress it, because if you upload the same exact file again, YouTube will reject it, so you have to compress it all over again. And you do kind of have all the promotional elements done already, so it doesn't take quite as long, but it's a whole other process you have to go over all over again. There's so much little stuff that goes into doing what I'm doing right now that people have no clue about. So I appreciate you asking. Most people just don't care. They're like, where's the content? I paid for it, I want it, and I totally get that. But there is a lot of work that goes into every little thing we do on the site. The next question is from Chad Alvarez. What's going on, Chad? Hey Shane, I know your wife has to watch you play several hundred games a year and put many hours in reviewing and playing games. Are there any games you guys play together, and if so, what are they? My wife goes through phases with games. She'll play them for a while, and then she won't play them for a couple years, and then she'll play them for a while, and then she won't play them for a couple years. There was a phase there where she was playing games with me pretty regularly, and that was kind of during the whole Rock Band, Guitar Hero era. We'd have a lot of friends come over, and she enjoyed playing Rock Band, and she would mostly sing, but she enjoyed it. And then she went through a period where I bought her like a Game Boy Advance SP, and she had that, and I bought her a bunch of games for it, and she would actually play them, and I even caught her on a flight one time playing it. Those were good days. Lately, she does not play games hardly at all. She got into Pokemon Go for a while, which was encouraging, and I was like, oh wow, maybe she's gonna get into it, but that didn't last very long. My wife works hard just like I do. She has a great work ethic. And I think her free time, she would rather spend doing other things, so I totally respect that. But I think if there's one game we've played the most together, it's definitely been Rock Band, without a doubt. Here's our last question for this episode from a username that I love very much. It's rowdywabbit. What is your all-time favorite and least favorite Game Trailers video not made in-house, i.e., Hey Ash, what you playin', Angry Video Game Nerd, Monty Screw Attack, community stuff, etc. Okay, let's see. So, I think a lot of people might think the easy answer is the Angry Video Game Nerd. That's not the answer for my favorite. I appreciated what he did for Game Trailers, and he drove a ton of traffic to us, and he was really the first ever Angry Gamer. And now he's been duplicated and copied by people like Angry Joe and all these other people. But he was the original, and he was a great Trojan horse for GT to get new people onto the site. So I appreciate everything he's done, and I've worked with James in all kinds of different capacities. a lot of people don't know this, but when I was at GT, I didn't just run Game Trailers. I ran a whole network of websites, and one of them was Spike.com. Spike.com every year would go and cover Comic-Con. And we had a contract with James and his Cinemassacre arm to create content for Spike.com. And basically, they were just reviews of old movies. And they did really well on the site, and the Spike.com audience liked it. But at Comic-Con every year, we would take him with us. And he would basically just walk the floor, and we would do a number of segments with him. And I got to really know him personally. James is a great guy. He's a really hard worker, and he's really funny. He's funny on the fly. Like, he would just come up with really funny quips and observations. He'd look at things and see it completely differently from how I saw it, and I love that, and I love working with him. He's a great dude. However, I never really liked Angry Video Game Nerd. It's just not my thing. It always seemed too juvenile for me, and maybe part of the problem was that I was already older whenever we were doing it, and I wasn't a 15, 16-year-old gamer at that point. I appreciate that he has a certain audience and that audience really loves his stuff. I've just never been a huge fan of AVGN. Probably the content that we got from Out of House that I was most proud of was probably Hey Ash, What You Playing? It was probably the least popular of all the Out of House content on GT because it was a little higher brow and a little more adult and a little more mature. And the humor, it wasn't gross out humor or crap jokes or whatever. Like, you had to watch and you had to pay attention, and the humor was a lot more subtle. And so I always understood why it didn't do as well as some of the other out-of-house content on GT. But I also felt like, as the editor-in-chief and the supervising producer of the site, we needed content that appealed to everybody. And we did have some older players who were coming to GT, and I was one, and I wanted to make sure I had content that I liked on there. So if you ever get a chance to go back and watch some of those episodes, they're really short, the commitment's not much, but they're very, very clever. And you can already see some of the people in there, like Ashley Birch, who's now become one of the industry's biggest voice actors. You can see a lot of people in that show that went on to do pretty big, important things. And I think that's a testament to how good that show was. So if I had to pick a favorite, it was definitely Hey Ash, What You Playing? My least favorite, I mean, I hate to say it's Angry Video Game Nerd, but honestly, like, you know, we would get a new episode of all these shows once a week. So we get a new AVGN every week, we get a new Hey Ash every week, we get a new Screw Attack Top 10 every week. We get a new Monty whenever, and man, mad respect and love to Monty May he rest in peace. Really sad to hear about what happened to him. And it was my job to watch each piece, so I would watch each one. But then once they kind of went through the process of going back and forth with the creators and us, and they went live, which ones did I watch again? I didn't watch Angry Video Game Nerd very much. We honestly didn't ask him to change the show all that much. So a lot of times once I watched it once, that was what ultimately went live on GT. And I can understand why a lot of people like it again. It just wasn't my cup of tea. That's it. Another Ask Shane Anything in the books. Another great set of questions. You guys are knocking it out of the park with these. If you want to ask questions in a future episode, you just need to pledge $10 or more per month to our Patreon. I will appreciate it very much. And so will the rest of the patrons on SIFTD, because the more money we get, the more great content that we can create. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time.